From the world of AV programming and control with James King, I'm Steve Greenblatt, and this is Ask the Programmer. Hey, James, it's good to be back with you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Steve. And how are you doing?
Doing well, and looking forward to having another conversation with you. If you didn't catch our last episode, I got to spill my guts and talk a bit about my journey in AV, and got to share some of the highlights, and didn't give you too many of the lowlights, but wanted to let make us a little bit more familiar and approachable, and hope that we're able to make that something that our community will value. So today we're going to give James a shot at this, and he's talked a little bit about his background, but I'm going to um, see what he has to say about how he's gotten into AV, and what's his journey been like up to present day. So James, why don't you take it away?
Oh, thank you, Steve. And I hope I don't bore our listeners too much. I'm sure many of them heard my history, but for those who haven't, so really, I guess I can say my history kind of started out um, in college where I was, I was going for IT. I wanted to be a network administrator. And I actually got a minor in business, but I was a student worker for the university. Uh, I did some programming, not AV wise, but like I actually built a system that the university used for a while after I graduated. That was a web portal for the faculty members to make software requests. There was another application I wrote that we use internally in the team to push images and wake computers up and all that stuff. I built that out as well. So I was always tinkering with programming. Um, and then I graduated, got hired full time for the IT team, and I was on networking, all that stuff. Like I was going down that path to be a network engineer, but mainly security cameras and phone systems for a while. And then all of a sudden, one day I got called up to the VP's office, and they're like, "You are no longer telecommunication. You are now academic computing, and you're going to report to this guy as your boss." But I've worked with him before. He was my boss when I was a student worker, so I known him for a while. No concerns there. And so when I was talking to him about like, okay, what's going on with my new role, and he's like, "Oh, I need you to help our AV person." So they had an AV person who's the lead. I was helping him. And I'm like, okay. And it really took off from there. I really found my footing and my career path, I would say, in the AV world. And I remember them coming to me and they're like, "We have this room that we need a microphone added to it." I never like AV is all new to me. All this program, this was like I'm in. I had no formal training, and they're like, "We need to add the microphone to it." I'm like, "Okay," and so I jumped onto the code and started playing around. And when I broke stuff, I'm like, "Okay, let me revert back." That's where a sandbox comes very handy because I developed all this in a sandbox, and I got it to a working state, and I pushed that out to the room, and everything was good. We No issues. And then I just started developing more of my programming skills in AV. And then probably I would say my biggest challenge in programming came when we're having issues in one of our high event space. Um the technology, long story short, was not up to par for what it should have been in that room. So we took it as, hey, like we're gonna undertake this. We're gonna do this in-house. We did 99% of the stuff in-house. We didn't do many outsourcing stuff. Um, so my boss gave me, a timeline. He's like, let's work on it. Good 6 months to a year to really develop that code, because it was a room that had 20 different locations that two different lecterns could be connected to, and three projectors, two for one room, one for another room. So it was a big one, and we knew we had to upgrade, but the only time we can get in the room to upgrade it was winter break. So I knew I had the time to actually work on it. So as I was developing, and I threw a lot of nice features in there, and my coworker would be coming in and be like, hey, it'd be cool if we could do this in that room, and start adding a lot of features. That was actually the first room I've actually worked with a DSP as well. I never worked up with a DSP up until that point, because we were all internal, like a one box unit for classrooms. We didn't need DSPs and all that stuff because we used the all built-in ones. So going there, I learned more about audio, got training on DSPs. Sorry, I will revert back. I know I jump around a lot, but as I mentioned, I had no formal training when I first started programming. But then I got signed up for the training classes. I went to my first programming class, programming 101. I'm in the class. I'm asking the instructor questions because I already had a project in mind. I know I've said this many times. I was like, always have a project in mind. So I had a project in mind that I was trying to work, and I was just wasn't sure because I didn't have the knowledge yet. So I was asking him questions in the training class. And as we were wrapping up the class, I kind of asked, I was like, hey, when is program 102? Because he was like, oh, a lot of these questions you are asking are covered in program 201. Sorry. I was like, oh, when is that? He's like, it's 2 months from now. I was like, I don't know if that's a bad time for higher ed for me to come into 201. I'll have to see. And another student said, hey, our boss won't send us the training that quickly. And the instructor turned to the person and goes, we recommend a year of programming 101 under your belt before you go 201. He's already asking level 2 questions. He already kind of understands. He's prepared for level 2. He's like, we recommend everyone else really taking a year on your belt. So that kind of gave me the confidence to continue the programming I was doing. I got all that program taken care of. And then I would, going back to our project, I'm working on that, building that event space out. And we really cleaned up a lot of issues. And I remember the first time the room was used, and going back to the whole audio side, was we had a big event. One of our users started yelling into the microphone, and it got crackling. You could still hear him, but it crackled a little bit. And my boss, the CIO, was there in the room. And I'm like, oh no. I was like, I got to work on this more. I got to tune this a little more. I messed up. So I went to my boss, the CIO at the time, after the event. I was like, so what did you think of the new room? I like how everything was working. He's like, oh, everything worked beautiful. Everything sounded great. And I was like, all right. I was like, only concern I had was when that person got loud on the mic, it crackled a little bit. I was like, I will fix it. Don't worry. I will get that taken care of. And he looked at me and goes, with the old system, when he would get loud on the mic, you couldn't hear a word he said. He's like, this was a whole lot better. I'm like, okay. I was like, no, all right, I understand that. And we did fix the crackle. We got that taken care of. But it was, that reinforcement. So that really gave me the drive to try to be more innovative and try new things, and push the envelope. And I think that what kind of led me to, venture out here west is because I always, even before I got into AV and program, I wanted to be in a management position. That's why I did a minor in business. I really saw myself as in a manager position. Pardon me. So I kept working on that path. And then when this job came out here west, I was like, look, I know UNLV, they do some cool stuff. I don't know if you've seen some of the projects they've done out here, main campus, but I've seen what they've been doing and they get to push the envelope. And I was like, this would be great. I can, push the envelope, get into the leader position. So that's why I applied and it's been great. The saying that's been the hardest for me in this new transition is getting away from the tech stuff and more into people side, the management. And that's very hard. And I think what's starting to click with me is I heard it I read this somewhere the other day, and it's like, as a tech, your job is to make sure the system works. As a leader, your job is to make sure the techs make sure the systems work. And so that's how I'm like starting to approach this a little more. Um, my journey in a nutshell. I'll pass it over to you, see if you have any
Yeah.
questions, follow up.
And I appreciate, thank you for sharing all those things. And I heard some interesting parts. One of them sounded like you were jumped in with 2 feet, and you really were not afraid to make mistakes, and you're not afraid to do things, and take on this challenge, which is, I think, unique for somebody, in a role, like this. I think if, what holds people back a lot of times is fear, as I talked about, in the last episode. Um, but I think where I saw a lot of what, you talked about really had more to do with sculpting the solution, not necessarily just writing code.
Yeah.
It-
So I want to tackle that fear one because I agree, and I see this in a lot of people, and I had fear. Don't get me wrong, but the best advice I ever got, and I will PG this comment, the advice I got was back in high school. I was taking A+ class in high school, and I was sitting there talking to one of my classmates who I was friends with. And I was telling him, I was like, I'm very concerned, I don't really do much on the computer. I'm afraid I'm gonna mess something up. And he looked at me and goes, get in there and mess things up. Because if you do, one, you learn not to do that again, and two, you learn how to fix it. Yes, you use other choice words there, but I took that to heart is you get in there and you mess up. I have made many mistakes. Every job I've gone to, I have made a mistake. I tell my team this is you're going to make mistakes. It's how you recover.
Mhm.
Um, going back, probably one of my biggest mistake was I'll throw two in there. One, when I was a programmer, I was a web developer before I got hired for the university full time, and I was writing a system. I missed one line of code in my system. I was doing password reset module. Missed one line of code in that. I changed every single one of our clients' passwords. Yeah, that was pretty bad. Luckily, we had backups. We got that taken care of. And one, you learn the importance of having a sandbox.
Mhm.
Don't work on production systems. And two, it's just like how things work. But yep, I got that taken care of. We had no hiccups. Luckily, the backups were most recent, so there was no issues changing, recovering. So that was a mess up. I learned from there. We recovered quickly. Second one was I was back east school. It was during orientation and I had a room that had temporary equipment in it that wasn't being used, or being offline. The repaired equipment came in, and all our system was on the network. Everything was network connected. No matter, even our remote sites could talk back to our main campus. So I knew when I went to swap out this equipment, I was like, "There's a potential for a network issue," and I really thought I took the proper steps to prevent it, but I didn't. I missed one step and plugged in the device. And as soon as the device plugged in, I lost connection to it, and then my email started blowing up, alerts. And I'm like, I knew right away. I'm like, oh no, I missed something. And I got everything up and running. It was like a minute down. But what I did ended up doing was taking down the AV network in the middle of orientation as they're trying to talk, and the mics just cut out. Now, then besides my emails blowing up, my phone's blowing up with people calling me and going, why is the system going down? So I got it all taken care of. Like I said, we were down for 30 seconds to a minute. Beautiful, no problem. But you learn, when you have a big event like orientation, you don't make any changes. You don't touch anything. And make sure you have all your steps taken care of if you have to make steps. So yeah, the fear is always there, but again, you gotta learn from your mistakes. Okay, if you're not making mistakes, you're not pushing yourself, you're not trying hard enough, and you're not building your toolbox.
You said that very well, and I couldn't agree more. It's that those are the only ways that you learn. Just you're getting yourself out of your comfort zone, and you're building new muscle. It's just, like if you go to the gym, you got to break the muscle down to be able to make it stronger.
Yep. Nope. 100%. And yes, like I said, there have been times I've been like, what is going on? I have no clue. And it's like, let's figure it out. Let's dive into it. May take me a little longer, but then you build that muscle. And next time it happens, it doesn't take that long.
The other thing that I would add is, putting yourself in an environment where you're allowed to make mistakes, because not everybody has uh, that comfort and that latitude to make mistakes. So look for situations where you're given the ability to learn and to be able to mess things up, because that's part of learning, and have a boss that understands that.
Yeah. And I also think it's hard for people who came from an environment that didn't allow it to go into the environment that allow it. I have seen it with people, and they're like, you could tell like there's that fear. And it's trying to get them away from that fear, because you have to build that muscle, as you said.
So is there the other part that I heard about, more you really seem to embrace AV, and think that that's really cool, because in all the times you're talking, code was kind of secondary, but it was more about being able to create solutions, and to be able to be um, innovative, and to be able to come up with apply new ideas, and really um, understand and put the technology to use. Would you what role do you think that plays in a programmer's success?
Oh, in my success, I think it was very key. I think because I feel programmers like to solve puzzles. You know, the code is your tool to solve a puzzle. And that's like you said, that you seeing how the system works and all that stuff. Like I found solutions that we needed to solve. And yeah, I just programming was the way I solved that puzzle. I would vision, I would sit there and be like, oh, you have this need. I can achieve that need for you with doing this, using this tool. So yeah, I agree. It's finding that balance, solving that puzzle, and taking all the pieces, putting them together, making them fit, and achieving cool stuff with it.
And I don't know if you know this, but you're in a unique position, because you have that ability to be that close to the users. A lot of programmers, they're given a design, very little information, and they're being told, make this work, and they have to either try to extract the information as to what should be done out of whomever they have access to, or they have to use their experience and past knowledge to put something together, leaving themselves flexibility to adapt when they're actually going to be implementing it, and taking feedback after the user is working with it. So you're you're in a bit of a unique position, which not every programmer gets that opportunity.
Yeah, I understand that, and I don't know. Maybe I'm naive on this. Is I think people need to get answers to the questions that they have.
Oh yeah.
However they need. I see this like just the other day, and there's not even a member of my team, but like we had a request come in, and I went to the user who was putting the request in for another user, the whole telephone thing. They were putting a request in for a user. So I went to the first user. I was like, so what is the support need for this? And the response was, I don't know. They didn't tell me. I was like, so you're expecting, like, you didn't ask? Like, what are you expecting my team to do? And they're like, oh, let me go ask them. And I'm like, okay, yeah, because I need to know what my team needs to do, like, for this event. And it does boggle my mind sometimes that people don't ask those questions. Um, I don't know if it's because they're fear they're going to get in trouble. They fear that, hey, if I ask this question, I'm going to look like an idiot. I don't know. I don't mind looking like an idiot. I'm going to ask questions. That's how I am. If I don't know the answer, I'm going to get clarification, and that's just how I am.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to transition into the last part about management and people, and this is a good segue, is that one thing, similar to what we talked about in the last episode, about being visionary, is that it seems like you um, know those questions to ask, and that's something that you may not realize when you started to learn that, but I think certain people in certain roles are just used to doing what they're told, and they're used to being very task oriented, where it sounds like what you're talking about is being more accountable, being more um, results oriented. So you're forcing yourself to say, what is the outcome we're trying to achieve here, and not just what you're asking me to do.
Oh, yeah. And I kind of chop this up as the difference between a chef and a baker. When you bake things, you have to follow the ingredients precise, or your end product doesn't turn out. So with chef, like you're cooking a meal, but let's say it called for green beans and you don't have green beans. And it's like, but I got asparagus. Your meal's still gonna be delicious.
Mhm.
But at baking, if you like, oh, it's calling for flour. I don't have flour. I'll add more sugar. Your product is not coming out great. Um, so I want to, what I keep telling my team is, start becoming more chefs and less baker. But, I understand, we all start out as bakers. We all go down those, step one, step two. Oh, wait, step three, I can't do. How do I solve this? And we build that muscle to be a chef. And that, I think, maybe I built it early on. Maybe I don't know if this worked for me. Um, or I'm just naive and I forgot how hard it was to be a baker moving over to the chef. But I feel like I'm in that realm where I'm asking the question. It's like, okay, step three is I don't have this solution. Let me go find something that will substitute for it. Where I feel other people begin, they get stuck and they don't know where to move. Uh, it's all about moving forward, even if you have to step sideways for a little bit. Um, Saying it off the top of my head now, like it kind of reminds me of like soccer. If you look at it, is everyone thinks you got to move forward, but you don't always have to move forward. If you're moving forward, you run into an obstacle as a soccer player. There is nothing wrong with turning and passing the ball backwards, going back and going the other way around, uh, to find that open path.
Yeah, and I would add that sometimes some people it comes to them a lot easier than others, and some people it may not come to at all. But before we wrap up, um, talk a little bit about that people side that you mentioned, because I think that's critical. And I think one thing that I'm a big believer in is that the best programmers don't make the best programming managers, and it's very different skill sets. So talk about um, the what you've learned in this process of moving from the doer to the manager.
So it's been a process, and I'm still learning on this. I know, as I always say, you're gonna make mistakes. Even as a manager, I'm making mistakes. I say the wrong things or I say it the wrong way. Um, It's all about getting out of your comfort zone. So, like, my team knows this. I've said this to my team, and this is things I've been trying to break myself is when I'm up against a challenge, especially when I'm dealing with a personality issue, like, okay, someone's not understanding something correctly. I go back to my comfort zone of fixing things. Tech is easy. So I've gotten to that where I always start noticing I'm doing things I should no longer be doing. Um, and I got to break that habit and, get away from, my job is no longer to make sure the system's working. My job is to make sure that the team gets the system working. So it's a new muscle I need to build. And yes, I'm going to have to break that muscle, break my old habits, get out of my comfort zone and build from there. It's having that grace, having that understanding, and having that awareness that, okay, you did this wrong, or you said it wrong. Like, best was I heard this on a podcast where someone was saying, talking, leading with empathy and stuff was they know sometimes when they gave their message, the content of the message was correct. That didn't change, but how they deliver it was wrong. And they would go back and be like, talk to their employee and be like, look, my message is not wrong, but how I deliver it is wrong. And, I apologize for how I deliver it, but the message itself still doesn't change. Understanding that, because I know I've got not sometimes where I had a message to my team and I was like, this is the message, but I delivered it wrong. It came out wrong. And later on, I reflected on it. I was like, okay, I delivered it wrong, but the message itself hasn't changed. I'm still believe in what I said, but not how I said it or how I delivered it.
So since this has been a challenge and a learning experience and so forth, how do you know, how did you know that this is something you've always wanted to do?
Good question. Um, I don't know, because I always kind of found myself in those kind of situations where, like, I always say, leader is not a title. You can be a leader without the title. You can have the title and not be the leader. I always kind of found myself being that boisterous person in a group and driving it. And I think my first real taste, and I read this in a book too, and it's 100% accurate. If you really want to challenge yourself as a leader and see how good you are, lead a volunteer group because
Oh
there's
yeah.
nothing there holding them there. If they will follow you and believe in what you're doing and all that, great. If you start losing your volunteers, you're doing a bad job as a leader. Because you get in a management position, employees require they feed on that paycheck. So they kind of because they're getting paid. So you don't know if am I doing a good job as a leader or am I not? Um, do it as a volunteer group, if they are saying you get more volunteers, you grow, that means you're doing something good. Um, I just I always question if I'm doing something right. And a lot of people say that's a sign of a good leader. Because sometimes I think I'm not a good leader, but I think we all have that imposter syndrome or, those concerns.
Yeah. And being open and honest about that is important. So thank you for sharing that. Um, probably a good place for us to wrap this one up. But I think, again, another great conversation. And thanks, James, for sharing all these details. And hopefully our audience has gotten to know you a lot better and me in the previous episode. And we could do more of this down the line. But we'd like to make this is a good way for us to become more familiarized and build this community that we're looking to build as AV programmers. And hopefully the stories are very relatable. James, how could people get in touch with you, learn more, ask some questions, and keep up with what you're doing?
Oh, very easy. You can reach me at Twitter or X, whatever we're calling it these days, at AB_James King. Anything with AB and AM, you'll find me on Sunday mornings when that's going on. LinkedIn, I'm there. I'm in the community. That's the programmer community on LinkedIn. Anything with HEPMA. Again, Google me, you'll find me.
Excellent. And one question that we didn't get to, but we'll save for another time, is about your higher ed side, because I know that that's a passion of yours, and that's something that we could talk about in the future. But uh, for me, you could reach me at Steve Greenblatt on social media. My company, Control Concepts, at controlconcepts.net. And as James said, we want to make sure that you can keep in touch with us, and the best way to do so is join our LinkedIn community or group called Ask the Programmer. And we're probably up to about 50 people in that group now, and we're going strong, trying to keep the conversations going, sharing thoughts about episodes, polls, and different topics. Great place to ask questions and uh, possibly even be on our show in the future. But in the meantime, you could also leave a rating, review, share your favorite episode. My company, Control Concepts, is a supporter of the show, and we build the building blocks for AV programmers to be successful, whether it's integrating with manufacturers' products and their API, or doing utilities. And if you reach out to me and join our group, I can get you a special discount code on something in our utility module store. So please let me know if you're interested, and please join and follow us. And our podcast can be seen on YouTube and listened to on your favorite podcast player. And until next time, this has been Ask the Programmer.